Good evening to you. My name is Dan Seitz, one of the leaders here at College Life. And it's my privilege, like Pearl said, to get to introduce our speaker for tonight. Our speaker is College Life leader, serves on the core team of leaders who kind of steered the ship of College Life. And he also serves as a member of the teaching team with Stanford and me. And anyway, he is a great friend of mine, and I'm happy to introduce him to you. His name is Adam Darbonne. And he is continuing on tonight with our series from 2 Corinthians, and his passage is 2 Corinthians chapter 5, starting at verse 1. And I'm going to read it to you. It says this: "For we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands. Meanwhile, we groan, longing to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, because when we are clothed, we will not be found naked. For while we are in this tent, we groan and are burdened, because we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. Now the one who has fashioned us for this very purpose is God, who has given us the Spirit as a deposit, guaranteeing what is to come. Therefore, we are always confident, and we know that as long as we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord. We live by faith, not by sight. We are confident, I say, and would prefer to be away from the body and at home with the Lord. So we make it our goal to please Him, whether we are at home in the body or away from it. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive what is due them for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad." This is the word of the Lord.
Sweet. So I'm Adam.
Hi.
That's our Yuki. You can talk about this later at home. Alrighty, so a couple months ago when Dan gave me this passage to preach, I was actually a little worried because I read through the passage and I realized this passage is all about clothing. And I don't even like clothes, to be honest with you. Like, I would just prefer to not be wearing a shirt all the time. They're uncomfortable. I like the sun on my skin. So I wasn't totally sure what to do with this passage until I read it a couple more times. And I realized that this passage is actually not about clothing at all. It's actually about nakedness. And that I can do something with. So tonight we're going to talk about nakedness. Tonight we're doing a dating series, so we're going to talk about nakedness, which is awesome. And nakedness just comes up all the time. Right? I mean, it's all over the place, and I think I figured out why. It's because nakedness is hilarious. And I mean, comedians have based their entire careers on this. In fact, my favorite comedian, Will Ferrell, has essentially based his entire career on the fact that nakedness is funny. And I almost threw up a slide of him in an American flag photo, but I saved you all, so you're welcome. But nakedness, it just comes up all the time, right? For instance, there is a real distinction between regular roommates and see each other naked roommates, right? Or I don't know if you remember, if you played sports in high school or just remember high school PE, but changing is always a little awkward. And girls, I don't know if you can relate to this or not, but guys, I know you can. Every locker room in every gym I have ever walked into my entire life, and the Ark is definitely not excluded in this, there is always some old naked dude just out there, just hanging out, right? In both senses of the word, and just and he's perfectly happy, but I'm really not happy anymore. I decided 8-year-old naked dude. And that's not really cool. And you try to block that kind of thing out, but that sort of is burned in your head. Like that's a hard thing to get rid of. Or sort of the quintessential example of nakedness is sex ed. And growing up, I mean, it's easily the most awkward part of childhood. And they try to make it better they make you watch these videos because I guess the teachers don't want to talk about sex ed or nakedness or anything. But they make you watch these videos and they think it'll be better if they make all the naked people blue. And it doesn't. Like, it makes it worse because you look at it and you're like, what did he do wrong that I should steer clear of? And the second last place in the whole world you want to look is at that screen. But the last place in the world you want to look is anywhere else in the room. Because here's what's going to happen, and you know this if you look anywhere else in the room. You look around and you're going to catch the eye of someone. And that someone will inevitably be the cute girl that you have liked since first grade. And you're going to catch her eye, and in that moment you catch her eye, she's going to think he is thinking about me naked. And your life is ruined for the next 3 to 5 years. Right? And most of us haven't had to deal with this since 7th grade or so. But I'm convinced it's no less awkward now as it was then, right? Like, you guys are having problems looking around at each other right now. And in this way, nakedness is just both totally awesome and just absolutely horrible at the same time. But think about this. Nakedness is just so pervasive in life that if all you did was sustain life, eat and sleep, that's all you did, you still couldn't avoid it because you dream about it. Right? How many of you have had the naked nightmare? Actually, don't raise your hand. I actually don't want to know if you've had the naked nightmare. But pretty much everybody, right? It's this dream where you wake up and you take a shower and you eat breakfast and you pack a lunch, you put your backpack on and you head to school. And you get to school and you realize that there's just something's not quite right. Like there's something, but you just can't put your finger on it until that moment, right? And you don't have clothes on, and you're naked, and everybody else has clothes on. And in that moment, there's just this horrible dropping feeling in your stomach. Right? Your stomach just drops to the bottom of your body cavity, and then it feels like it's eating itself, like inside of you. And then you begin to panic, and your throat starts to swell up. And so what do? Of course, you take your hands and you begin to try to cover what's important to cover. But at this point, you realize that at some point, over the course of the night, after you went to bed, but before you forgot to put clothes on, your hands have actually shrunk. So now instead of hands, you have like little stubby, nubby 5-year-old things on the end of your arms that just start cutting it in the coverage department. You know what I mean? And it's just awful. And then you have to go and make the horrible decision that no one should ever have to make about what to cover, like what is the most important to cover, and it's awful. It's horrible. Do you feel horrible? I feel horrible explaining this right now. Why don't I tell you? It's this dream precisely that Paul is talking about in 2 Corinthians 5. But Paul argues that this dream is actually a reality. And that's my first point. Recognize that the naked nightmare is actually a reality. Because isn't it true that most of us are actually living this nightmare? Isn't there something about us, and we know deep down, something's just not quite right, and we can't put our finger on it, but something is just not quite right. And we know that there's something messed up, and we know if that was exposed, we'd be embarrassed. And every once in a while it comes out, and we're embarrassed by it. Don't you feel like if people really knew you, they really knew your brokenness, that they wouldn't really want to associate with you? Like if your friends really knew like what went on in your head behind closed doors, that they wouldn't really want to be as close friends as they are with you. I mean, I feel this way. If Dan knew my brokenness, there's no way he'd let me get up here and speak tonight. Like, we are living this nightmare. We are naked. There's something not quite right. We are exposed. And people try to convince us all the time that we're not. And that we are in fact clothed. We just need to remember that, and we just don't feel like it, and we just need more confidence, maybe they say, or Or what we need is a new 7-step method to be highly effective. Or we need some book, and that book, we'll read through the book, and then it'll be like epiphany, and we'll realize that we actually have clothes on. Or maybe the one, probably the one I hate most, right, we just need more alcohol, is really what I mean. Like that. Like, if you're feeling naked, like, put your drunk blanket on, and you'll be nice and covered up. But then we explore these options, and we realize it doesn't really help, right? We get through the book, and like for a day, we're like, yeah, sweet. And then like a day later, it's like, well, we're back to the feeling exposed and not confident, and it doesn't really work. And why is that? Well, Paul says it's the wrong approach. Because instead of trying to realize that you are clothed, you need to recognize that we're living the nightmare, that we are in fact naked. Paul says in verse 2, meanwhile we groan, longing to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, because when we are clothed, we will not be found naked. Right? We're naked. Paul's saying, look, we're going to have to stand before God. And we're messed up. I'm messed up. Some of you in this room know that better than others. And our sin, every time we screw up, it leaves a new mark, a new scar, a new zit, a new tumor, a new wart on our body. And we've got enough of them by now that we just can't cover them up. Our hands are too small, and even if they weren't, our hands are all scarred up too. And if you think the naked dream is bad, imagine standing before the God of the universe, right? The one who created you. And you know when you create something, you know its intricacies. You know when it gets cracked or chipped. And we stand before that God and realize we simply don't cut it. That we are naked, and there's shame in that. So what do we do? What's the answer to that? Well, here's the answer that 2 Corinthians 5 gives. It's my second point. If you want to wake up from the naked nightmare, realize that Jesus offers you the ultimate clothing. Realize that Jesus offers you the ultimate clothing. Paul says in verse 4, we are burdened because we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. This is just great imagery. I don't know what you think of when Paul says swallowed up by life. I think of surfing. I love to surf. I'm from Northern California, though, where the water is really cold. And there's this point in surfing where the waves rolling in, and you're paddling out, and you have to decide: are you going to duck under that wave, or are you going to go over the wave? And that decision is largely based on has that wave broken, or is it going to break before you get to it? But in Northern California, the water is really cold, and so if you don't have to put your head under the water, you don't want to. So sometimes you'll sort of make a bad decision and try to go over a wave that you shouldn't have. And ill-advised to try to go over a wave that you shouldn't have. Yeah. And that's not me. I can't do that. But you don't realize until the last minute, but you get up to that wave, and then it's like, oh crap. Which is probably what that guy's thinking. But and it starts to curl, and it starts to curl over you, and then it just swallows you up. So what's the point? It's that when you get swallowed up by something, no one can see you anymore, only what has swallowed you. Okay, let me say that again. When you get swallowed up by something, no one can see you anymore, only what has swallowed you. If I swallow a piece of steak, you won't be able to see that piece of steak anymore, but it'll still exist, but all you'll be able to see is me. This is what Paul is talking about when he's talking about the heavenly clothing that we are put in. So instead of standing before God naked, instead you're standing before God with clothes on, heavenly clothes, perfect clothes, so that your warts and your zits and your tumors, they're covered up, and you appear perfect before the God of the universe, because you are clothed with Jesus. What a picture. And so as Christians, we can be confident in that. Right? There is no shame, no embarrassment, no exposure. We are made perfect in the eyes of God because we've accepted the clothing offered to us.